Shalom, Chag Sameach, everybody. Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach. It's good to have everyone back. Chag Sameach. So I want to propose that we, of course, continue with the 13 Petalled Rose, but towards the end of the class, we'll go out to the Sukkah and then say the blessing on the Lulav. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the symbolism of the Lulav and the Etrog. And then maybe we can also say a blessing in the Sukkah, for the Sukkah itself, Leishev Basukkah. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah, we're good with that, Gila, right?
Yes.
Okay. As we do each class, I want to start with a special psalm, Psalm 45, from this book, which is Rabbi Steinsaltz's commentary on the book of Psalms, but it's in Hebrew. I don't know if it's out yet in English, but it's a beautiful book of Psalms that I can pass around afterwards with nice illustrations too. But we'll say a special psalm for the full and speedy recovery of Rabbi Steinsaltz and our dear teacher. This is a psalm that speaks a little bit about the power of the mouth and of speech in general. And since it was his speech that was hurt the most when he had his stroke over 2 years ago, then we pray to God that that power is restored to him fully so that he can continue to teach us without any interruption. Okay. All right, we'll turn back to our books, 13 Petalled Rose. It's page 79. Let's start from the beginning of the paragraph, which says the essence of life in the world. Just to recap very quickly, there's, I think, two main ideas. I mean, I'm sure many more ideas, but two main ideas, and that is that every human being has a unique mission in this world, where each individual is endowed with different purposes and different missions in this world. And the more we can know ourselves, the more we can fulfill that mission, because the mission is based, of course, on the gifts, the talents, the skills, and so on that God gives us. That's how He wants us to use them. And it's also based on the situations we find ourselves. Everyone finds himself in different moments and in different places at all times. And the moments and the places that we find ourselves in are indicative of what God wants us to do at that moment, at that place. That was one big idea that we spoke about. A second idea is we spoke about what is really unique to Judaism as opposed to other religions, and that is that God does not command us to live in the heavens. That's pretty easy to do, right? You can divorce yourself from this world, live like a monk, go move to Tibet or wherever else you want, and meditate for the rest of your life. Then you'll be living in the heavens. And God also doesn't want us to live in I'm using the word in purposefully, in the world, or in this planet. That's also pretty easy to do. Go immerse yourself in some materialistic pleasure and sink in there. God really wants us to merge the two. He wants us to be above and a year below at the same time. Or as the Lubavitcher Rebbe puts it, to be within yet stay above. That's really how he puts it. So he wants us to merge heaven and earth together. And in a way, if there is so we spoke of the individual purpose to everyone, but if there's a collective purpose to everyone, that is each in our own way to draw heaven down on earth. How so? By sanctifying everything that we do, from tying our shoes, saying a blessing over vegetables, like we're about to do at the end of this class, by sanctifying everything that we do and bringing a piece of heaven to that place or to that moment or that piece of earth. And in a way, by doing so, we really are creating an abode for God in this world where He can feel comfortable with this harmony or with this kiss of heaven and earth. That's really two main ideas that were shared, of course, in Rabbi Steinsaltz's beautiful and very selected words. But we'll continue here at the top of page 79. And does anyone want to read? Let's stop there. There's a lot to chew on here. Purposely go back to Ezekiel 1, since Rabbi Steinsaltz himself mentions it here, in which he speaks of this fire that resides in every human being. You know, King Solomon has a very similar verse to the verses in Ezekiel. The verse is from the book of Proverbs that says, Ki ner Hashem nishmat adam, which means that the soul of man is like a candle of God, is the candle of God. Because the candle of God is like the soul of man, to be exact in the translation. Ner Hashem nishmat adam. That's why, by the way, when we commemorate a Yortzeit, we light a candle, yahrzeit candle. Why yahrzeit candle? Because that's what best represents the soul of the person that we are connecting with on the yahrzeit. Soul is like the candle of God. Now, why is the soul compared to a candle of God, both in Ezekiel and Book of Proverbs, and also in other places? Why? Because if you look carefully at the candle, it has two parts to it. You have the fire and you have the wick and the wax, right? Wax and the fire. The wax is the body, and the soul is the fire. We're made of two components, body and soul. Now, the body, the wax, doesn't move. It's happy with where it is. It stays here below. It's kind of stuck here below. The fire, on the other hand, the soul, wants to leave the body. If you look at a flame, it constantly strives to go upward. It doesn't care that it will lose its existence. Think about it. If it flies up, it doesn't care because it has no ego whatsoever. All it wants to do is to reconnect to its higher source, even if it's going to be swallowed by God's fire. It's not going to be anything anymore. But it has no ego, and therefore, all it wants is that yearning upward. Now, on the one hand, we have to be waxes. On the other hand, we also have to be fires, and we have to merge the two together. There's a beautiful story about the Lubavitch Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson, of blessed memory. He was visited by. There's a great book I would recommend to anyone especially anyone who's interested in Israel's history, modern state of Israel's history. But there's a good book called The Prime Ministers. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was a movie made out of it not long ago. Oh, you did it for the book club. Thank you. So the author is Yehuda Avner, Alav Shalom, passed away some 2 years ago. But Yehuda Avner really was the right-hand man to four or five prime ministers. So in that book, he tells the stories, the inside stories of what he experienced and the special historic moments he experienced with those five prime ministers. But he also tells the story of how he visited the Lubavitch Rebbe for the first time. And he had a private audience late at night, and they spoke for a long time. And towards the end, he asked the Rebbe, what is your role? What's the role of a Rebbe, of a Hasidic Rebbe? And the Rebbe told him what he told many others. I just read this yesterday. It's a different story. But there was a young man who was encouraged by his father to go and see the Lubavitch Rebbe and receive a blessing. And this man was completely uninterested. I have nothing to do with rabbis. What do you want from me? But he nonetheless went to respect his father. And the Rebbe asked him, what do you learn? And he says, at this and this university. He says, what are you learning? He says, I'm learning engineering. The Rebbe says, that's interesting. I also learned at a university. The young man says, where? He says, at the Sorbonne. Oh, I have newfound respect for this rabbi at the Sorbonne. It's like the Ivy League of the world. So what did you learn? Engineering also, the Rebbe tells him. What type of engineering? He says, electrical engineering. And then the Rebbe told him a sentence, as he wrote, that has changed his life. He says, the Rebbe said, I learned electrical engineering, but I prefer to light electricity in people's souls. Oh, wow. It's beautiful. But in a way, that's what the Rebbe told Yehuda Avner. What's the role of a Rebbe? The Rebbe is to light people's souls. At the end of the audience, the Yehuda said to the Rebbe, so did you like my soul? And the Rebbe said, no, that only you can do. I've given you the match with which you can light your soul. You remember that story from the book club? But it's a powerful story because in a way, it also speaks of the essence of man and of man's mission in this world, that we have to combine the wick, the wax, and the fire itself, so that it can be that candle, that Ner Hashem, that candle of God, that illuminates the world. And now it's very hard because the soul, again, wants to go upwards. It wants to be divorced from this world. It's not interested in this world. They once caught Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who's the author of Tanya. We study here every Sunday morning during soul study, but Tanya, I think, is one of the most important books in general. It's certainly one of the most important Hasidic books. But they once caught him, like falling on the floor, rolling over in this complete state of ecstasy and meditation. And he was shouting, God, I don't want this world. I don't want the world to come. I don't want your rewards. I don't want anything. All I want is you alone. That's all I want. And in a way, that's really summarizes the desire of the soul, of the fire. Fire doesn't want anything. Fire wants to be one with the fire, with God. And we have moments like that in our own lives. Sometimes we have a spiritual awakening that happens out of nowhere. We wake up in the morning and we say, gosh, I'm sick and tired of this. I just want to be one with God. Sometimes it comes from meditation and real work. But we all have moments. What are those moments? The cry of the soul. That's what it is. We have bodily moments too. But again, the goal of Judaism is to merge the two together. I think the best passage in the Talmud that describes this so well, it speaks of the 4 sages that went and explored the secrets of the Torah. You may remember this passage, but there were 4 sages who went to explore the secrets of the Torah: Rabbi Akiva, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, and Elisha ben Abuya. Rabbi Akiva is the only one, as the Talmud says, that went in peace and came out in peace. Nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. The rest, something happened to them. When their soul experienced that heaven, something happened. Again, there was it flew out of the wick, so to speak. What happened? Ben Azai died. Ben Zoma became crazy. And Elisha ben Abuya became a heretic. But that's because, again, a fire doesn't want to be here. So something happens, and then the candle is not a candle anymore. Rabbi Akiva knew exactly how to merge the two together. And that's why he remained wholesome. By the way, just to mention this, but it's got everything to do with this. Ben Azai, the person who died, he's a person who did not get married. And his peers said to him, how can you be such a sage and not get married? There's a commandment that says, you should be fruitful and multiply. And he responded, what can I do? My soul yearns, desires Torah. Desires Torah study. What happens to a man like that? His soul can't live in a body. But in a way, he missed the point. That's why the Talmud says he's never called by his first name. He never fulfilled the purpose of his name. His first name was Shimon, but everyone refers to him as Ben Azai. There's a man who doesn't fulfill that purpose of merging heaven and earth, of ensuring that the candle is a full candle. It's not a person who can fulfill his Shimon, his own name. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we see that there. The high priest would go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur with a red string attached to his leg, to his foot. And there was a Kohen outside of the Holy of Holies holding this rope or this string. And if you would feel something shaking, that meant that the high priest died from this experience, right? The soul leaving the body. Since he couldn't go into the Holy of Holies, he then had to pull him out. And he would die. But you find that in other places. It says that when God gave us the Torah, the 10 Commandments, he spoke the first 2. Moses spoke the rest, the additional 8. Why did Moses speak the rest? Why didn't God do it? And the Midrash tells us because when God said Anochi, the first commandment, from that experience we died. The soul left our body. And so God had to come and revive us. And then he gave us the second commandment, and again we died. It was too much. So, again, we died. So then Moses said that we can't have this happen again. I'll continue on from here. So you have a lot of stories like that. There's a beautiful story about Rabbi Eliezer ben Durdia in the Talmud. Eliezer ben Durdia was a Jew who prouded himself, boasted that there was not one prostitute that he did not go to. Eliezer ben Durdia. He went to everyone. And then they told him, but there's a prostitute we heard that lives 7 mountains away from here. You haven't gone to that one. He says, you're right, I'm going to go. I'm going to prove that I can go to every single one of them. And he went to climbing all these 7 mountains. Peak of the 7th mountain, he caught himself. And he buried his face in his legs. And he started to cry. He says, what have I been doing? I've been wasting my life. And he cried and did teshuvah. He cried to the point that his soul left his body. When his soul left his body, there was a heavenly voice that came out and said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Durdia, you're welcome in paradise. He wasn't a rabbi whatsoever, but because of that teshuvah, he allowed his soul to awaken itself again. And that was another experience. You have many stories like that of people whose soul was just so sucked into those heavens that the body or the candle itself ceased to be. The wick and the wax were left alone. So that's really what he's saying, and we have to be cognizant of that. That in us we have that fire, and we have to nurture it. On the other hand, we can't nurture it too much, in a way, right? Because we also have to focus on the wax itself. What's interesting is this: Rabbi Steinsaltz, I've heard him say that a lot, because there's an expression that's been overused and that has lost any real meaning. It's a Jewish expression. But what expression am I referring to? Tikkun olam, right? Everyone speaks of Tikkun olam, and they've given their own interpretations to that word, whether you think it's social justice, or whether you think it's just being kind to your neighbors and to the homeless, etc. All this, it's nice, it's fine. But Tikkun olam it comes from the prayer of Aleinu, that we say. That expression, Tikkun olam, fixing the world, comes from that prayer of Aleinu. Unfortunately, by Aleinu, everyone is tired already and no one pays attention to this prayer. Although it's really one of the most beautiful prayers in the Siddur. You should really pay attention to it because it's amazing. It's a beautiful, beautiful prayer. But what does it say there? Letaken olam b'malchut Shaddai. It's not just Tikkun olam, repairing the world. It's repairing the world with the kingship of God, b'malchut Shaddai. What does this mean? That you're combining the fire of God with this world, the Malchut Shaddai, right? With Tikkun Olam, with this world. How can this world be fixed? By exposing our wax to the fire of God. So in a way, as much as we may think they are separate, they have two different engines, so to speak, they really are there to complement one another. The wax, the candle is not a candle if it doesn't have a fire. The fire is not a fire if it doesn't have a candle to sustain it. By joining the two together, then we have a real candle. And in a way, by exposing the world to Malchut Shaddai, then it can be tikkun, then it can be fixed. Without that, it can't be fixed. So that tikkun olam must be revived really with the divine values that are truly divine. That's how the world is fixed. That's how the candle becomes complete. There's another word, another expression that I've heard also from our Steinsaltz a lot. We speak about being a light unto the nations. Isaiah spoke about being a light unto the nations. There wasn't electricity. Light bulbs did not exist. So he meant a real light, like a candle type of light. If you look at a candle type of light, you see that to be a light unto the nations, that type of light, you have to sacrifice yourself. You have to give of your wax. That's what a real candle does. To be just a light in a very fluffy way, you do what you do and then you go home and you're a completely different person. That's not the light that will work. A light needs to give of its candle. It has to have a level of self-sacrifice, self-annulment, of other orientation as much as possible. Your candle has to give of itself. Your wax has to give of itself to be that light. That's also that type of candle that we're speaking about. Really, it's not a technical thing. It's complete devotion. It's like the story, about the chicken and the cow. The chicken and the cow were walking on the street in old-time Scottsdale, and they see a panel saying, breakfast 2 eggs for $2.99, lunch ribeye steak for $9.99. So the chicken says to the cow, that sums up the value of our existence. I'm worth $2.99, you're worth $9.99. And the cow says, no, it's very different. For you, it's just a little contribution. For me, it's utter devotion. I have to die for that steak. And in a way, God wants us to be cows. He does, not just to contribute. In order to be a light unto the nations, you have to sacrifice your wax. That's an excellent question, because you also have to know how to give. Because at the end of, at the other side of the coin, there's a receiver, there's a recipient, and sometimes the recipient doesn't know how to receive. Speaking of light, if someone just came out of a dark room, you can't expose him to full light. It reminds me of the argument between, Hanukkah is coming up, between Hillel and Shammai. We follow Hillel, we don't follow Shammai. Why? Because Hillel was a person who knew how to give that light. He was aware very much of the world that he was giving the light to. Shammai, not so much. Shammai was a fanatic in many ways. What's the argument? How to light the Chanukiah, the menorah, right? Do you light 8 candles on the first night and then go down to 7 and 6 and then 5? Or do you light 1 candle first, which is the opinion of Hillel, and then 2 candles and then 3 candles? What they're really asking is your question. How is the world going to receive our light? Is it going to receive the full light at first, right at the get-go? Or maybe it's not mature enough, it's not ripe enough to receive so much light. So it needs to have a little bit of light at a time. And we follow Hillel. 1 light first, and then 2 lights, and slowly and gradually you have to be completely cognizant of the world that is receiving the light. But sometimes you can burn people. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would always say, he would be a person who faced the world and illuminated the world maybe more than anyone else in our generation. But he always said, be'ofen hamitkabel, which means in a way that can be received, that it can be received. Be cognizant of that. What's interesting is this. It says that when Mashiach will come, we'll follow the law of Shammai, not of Hillel. Why? Because when Mashiach will come, the world will be mature enough. Will be filled with divinity. And then we'll be able to go, full force, full steam. A prophet says, that the world will be filled with the knowledge of God like the waters fill the sea. It's how full of knowledge will have. Handle the truth of Shammai. Then the world will be filled with God, and then we can handle truth. Then, the truth has to be broken down to small pieces, like Hillel did. There's so many examples of that. The schools of Hillel and Shammai, I think they both speak about how this light is received. That's why you follow Hillel, because Hillel had the wisdom to understand who was talking to him. But, the famous story of this man coming to Hillel, first to Shammai, and say, teach me the whole Torah of 1 foot. Gayereni, convert me by teaching me the whole Torah on 1 foot. Shammai says, get out of here. He took his measuring stick. He was an architect, which, by the way, explains a lot, because, you have to measure things. I'm not going to break my calculations here. This is the way, this is the truth. Architects are people of truth. So he took his ruler, that's what it says. He took his ruler and kicked him out. And saying, in other words, if you want truth, I can't do it on 1 foot. Hillel embraced the person. And he said, Da'alach saneh, what is hated upon you, don't do it to others. That's the Torah on 1 foot. And ve'elach zil gmor. And from now on, go and study. That's what he said. People forget that last piece. It's not, Torah on 1 foot is don't do unto others what you don't want others to do to you. But you still have to continue to study. But you have many examples. Like one more example, which is a humorous one, is Hillel and Shammai have a whole discussion. If we're deviating a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It actually has a lot to do with the Hadass, and I'll explain why. How should you dance in front of a bride at a wedding? You're supposed to rejoice the bride and the groom. So how should you dance in front of a bride? Hillel says it's simple. You should tell her Kala na'ava chasuda, that she's beautiful and kind. Shammai says, what if she's ugly? You'll be lying. You can't say that. Now, again, this is a man of truth. So if she's ugly, don't say anything, according to Shammai. Hillel responded, she's always beautiful in the eyes of her husband. So even if in your eyes she's not, in the eyes of her husband, that's why you're not lying. And again, you have a man of truth. So I'm sorry, truth is truth. So you have examples like that. Why does it have to do with the Hadass? Because Shmuel, a Talmudic sage of Babylon, who was very friendly with the king of Babylon, King Shapur of Persia. This was the generation after the destruction of the temple, about 100 and something CE. But he would dance with a myrtle. He would take one of these and dance in front of the bride. That's how he would dance. Whether he said Kalana v'chasuda or not, I don't know if he followed Hillel or Shammai. But he would dance with one of these. Why with one of these? What's the symbolism of this? And that goes back to Hillel. So what's interesting about this is that, going to Sukkot a little bit, is that out of the 4 species, 2 of them are unclear as to what they are. The Torah tells us very specifically, take a lulav, kapot temarim. There's no doubt about what a lulav is. It tells us very specifically about arvei nachal, what the willow is. Take a willow and take this, a palm branch, kapot temarim. But it doesn't tell us take an etrog. It tells us pri etz hadar, take a beautiful tree, and a tree that dwells. It means that dwells on its tree throughout the year. There's only one tree that dwells on its tree throughout the year, and that's the etrog. That's how we know it's a etrog. The hadas, it doesn't say take a hadas, a myrtle. It says anaf etz avot, which means a branch that has its leaves overlapped. Now there could be other plants. The oleander. The Talmud asked the question. See, they knew botanics. The oleander has leaves that are overlapped. So why not take an oleander? And Abaya tells us, a sage by the name of Abaya tells us it can be the oleander. Because the oleander is thorny and poisonous. And the ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness and peace. As we sing here every Shabbat. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and its paths are paths of peace. And therefore it must be the hadas. It's not thorny and not poisonous, quite the opposite. It has the most pleasant smell. Shmuel would dance with the hadas in front of a bride to almost teach them the idea of marriage, that you have to have ways of pleasantness and paths of peace. That's how you can make your marriage successful. So he would dance with the hadas. But it goes back to Hillel's pathway. Hillel and Shmuel had the same school of thought, that you have to be pleasant. Ba'ofen hamitkabel, again, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe would say, you have to know who you're talking to. I once asked Rabbi Steinsaltz if there's a topic that I should be speaking to, that rabbis that I should be speaking about, that rabbis in the world should be speaking about. What does our generation need to hear? And Rabbi Steinsaltz says, I can't answer the question. I said, what do you mean? What do you speak about? He says, a rabbi who doesn't know his crowd is a rabbi that's not allowed to speak to his crowd. You have to know your crowd. I can give you a list of 10 topics, but maybe they don't fit your crowd. So you have to know your crowd. You have to know who you're speaking to. On the other hand, it's tricky because you also don't want to compromise the light.
No.
So you still want to give over the help or the values maybe that you're trying to give over, but on the other hand, you also have to know how to give them over without compromising.
Yeah.
That's why I think the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe were very exact. Be'ofen hamitkabel, which means in a way that is well received.
Right.
In other words, you have to find out the way. If I'm giving you this book, the book remains the book. Now, whether I'm going to wrap it with a purple or pink or blue gift wrap, that's already the way. I have to know how to hand it over, but the book remains the book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tricky part also. Okay, very good. Let's try to finish this paragraph. So we were up to, this is not only a matter of periods in one's life. Anyone, Dennis, go for it. Right. So the descent sometimes is an ascent in and of itself. Descent and ascent are tricky words because sometimes the greatest ascent is descent. And sometimes the greatest descent is ascent. If I'm fleeing from something, I'm descending. Now I might be ascending, but I'm fleeing. So it's a descent. It's like the Rabbi Shalom Ber, who was the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, taught that the evil inclination is quite clever. Because what it can do is that it can convince a person to pray and to say Tehillim, say the Psalms, etc., when really it needs to do good. So you might feel like you're ascending to the heavens, I'm praying. But that's the biggest descent. That's the evil inclination overcoming you. And same the other way. The descent, I might feel that I'm descending, I'm dirtying myself in all sorts of activities. But that's the greatest ascent that could be. We told the story over Sukkot, going back to Sukkot, about a man that became a very big Hasidic master, Rabbi Uri of Sterlik, I think the name was, Rabbi Uri of Sterlik. But when he was still a simpleton, Rabbi Uri would attend the synagogue of the two brothers, Zusha and Elimelech, the two Hasidic brothers of 250 years ago. And during Sukkot, Elimelech stops his prayer and he says, gosh, there's the smell of the Garden of Eden in our synagogue coming from an etrog. So he goes to his brother and says, let's find out whose etrog this is. Let's go and smell it. Smell everyone's etrog. And they went from person to person smelling the etrog. And it came from the etrog of Uri. He says, Uri, your etrog smells like the Garden of Eden. What did you do? And Uri said, it's a long story. Tell us. So he says, look, every year I save a lot of money. I barely make a living, but I save a lot of money just to buy the best etrog in the marketplace of Lamberg. I travel there, I saved all this money, and I buy the best etrog in the marketplace. This year I saved a lot of money, and on my way I stopped by an inn and to rest, and then I see a Jew crying, sobbing to the innkeeper in the bar of the inn. So I approached him and I said, what's wrong? And he said, you don't understand, my whole livelihood just went down the drain. I'm a wagon driver, my horse collapsed and he died. I don't know what to do. He says, well, why don't you buy a new horse? I don't have the money. The innkeeper then got involved in the conversation and he said to Uri, you know what? I have a brand new horse for you. It usually costs 80 guldens. I'll sell it to you right now for 50 guldens. Uri got involved and he said to the innkeeper, well, what if I only give you 45 guldens? It's 45, that's the lowest I'll go. Give it to me right now, I'll give this guy a brand new horse. He gave him 45 guldens. In his pocket he had 50 guldens for a new etrog. He only had 5 now left. He continued on to Lamberg after saving this man. And he could only buy a very cheap etrog. Kosher one still, but a cheap one for 5 guldens. He came back, prayed with it in the synagogue of Zusha and Elimelech. Zusha and Elimelech said, now we understand why your etrog is so special. It only costed 5, but it is the Garden of Eden itself. And in a way, for him it was a descent, right? But that's the greatest ascent it could be. So it's a tricky word. And in a way, I think that's because really the real ascent is through descent. What time is it? Okay, so let's stop here. Let's go. And let's take some of the cakes also, because we can say the blessing in the sukkah. Okay, please join us in the sukkah.